Today's video is my last fun little summer project before I switch gears to fall wardrobe. And this adorable vintage reproduction pattern from Simplicity is for my daughter. And it's just a little simple, it's so simple. I'm just going to show you the back of the pattern. Simple, simple, simple. We're going to do this one with the two colors. So she chose these jersey knits, very simple little jersey knits in nice vintagey fun colors. Now, you can't wear a bra with a halter. We're going to line it. And you don't have to line the whole thing, but you have to line in critical parts. So what's going to get lined right in this area. So I bought some more jersey knit and just an ivory white to line it with. So we're going to pull this out. This pattern is Simplicity 5555. It specifically says it needs to have a knit, and it even has the little stretch guide on there. Oh my goodness, they really just reproduced it pretty much. They didn't change too much at all. It looks like it's just a one size thing. Okay, all the different tying things. We'll do a bunch of tying options so you can see all the ways you can wear it. Super cute. I will say, because it is sort of a one size thing, the smaller you are, the more options you will have for how you can tie it, because the ties will wrap farther. If I could take this shirt and put it on me as a plus size woman, and it's not going to fit the same at all. So one size, but not one fit. The pattern though is very simple. You've got your tie end, and then look at how big this is. It takes 3/4 of a yard of two fabrics. Can you see this? This is the actual halter itself. It has the neck tie is attached, and then the waist tie is partially sewn on. So that's it. That's all there is to it. I'm going to cut it in 3 fabrics. So I'm going to cut one side in one color, one side in the other color, and then I'm going to cut double layer, just part of it for the lining in the bust line. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this apart, and then I'll show you how I do that. Begun laying out. This is 3/4 of a yard wide, and I stacked my 2 fabrics. And you just want to make sure when you stack it that you get your pattern. Like you can see, my selvage is hanging off my top layer more than my bottom layer. So you want to make sure that their pattern is not in that selvage edge. The way this is set up, it says 3/4 of a yard is all you need, and it shows straight of grain. Well, it's actually cutting this. Intuitively, we would have turned it the other way, but you're cutting so that the center front is on the crosswise grain, and like the waistline is on the lengthwise grain. So I've got 60 inches of fabric here. This is my main piece, and it just fits in 3/4 of a yard. And if you go to like your fabric store, they're really careful of not giving you an extra inch, and they don't. If you go to a boutique fabric store, they often will give you a thumb or an inch. They give you a little extra. But if you go to JoAnn's and places like that, they do not, as a rule. So I can just barely get it out. I'm going to pin it down. This is the tie piece. It also goes on the lengthwise grain. And what I'm going to do, I don't want to cut it right out of the middle like this. I want to preserve this big piece, because this could be a sleeve for my daughters. It could even be part of a bodice. Like it's a lot of fabric right there. This is going to be close to half a yard. So I'm actually going to go all the way to this other end down here, and I'm going to cut it off at this very end so that I preserve a nice big piece here for something else. Now I will show you how I'm going to line it, because I'm not going to cut this entire piece out of lining. I don't want the ties full of lining. That will make them stiffer and not as drapey and a little harder to work with. I really only want to line this section right here. So I'm going to fold in my pattern pieces so that I'm only getting the front bust line. It's just a rolled hem around the entire thing. But I'm going to go ahead and cut out these pieces, and then we'll work on the lining. All right, this is my piece that you saw a minute ago laid out with all of its little arms folded in. So here's the center front seam, and I left the curve, and I want to go just a little bit, this is for my lining piece, just a little bit into the tie, but not very far, just to keep the lining from moving around or giving us issues. It's up to you how far in you want to go. I don't want to stitch down too much of this. I don't want it to show through. I want it just to be caught in the seams and the finishes. So this is how I chose to do it. I just folded it in. I just need a nice little square to cover the bust line area to keep everything in place. So this is I've got 2 layers here. It's folded over, and I'm just going to cut out 2 lining pieces, and then we're ready to go to the sewing machine. I'm at the sewing machine. I've started unpinning my pieces. I have orange thread currently on here, so I'm going to go ahead and sew the orange side, the orange tie on the orange side, the right side. So I'm just going to sew 3/8 of an inch. This has 3/8 inch seam allowance. I'm going to just sew this together real quick. This is one you don't need a serger for. It's just straight stitched together, and then they turn up a hem, and it's done. Super easy. All right, so there's my little 3/8 inch seam allowance. So I have the tie on one side. If you have fabric like this where you can't tell the right from the wrong, you could easily end up with 2 left sides. This is going to be my left. Here's my little lining pieces. And I'm going to line up with my bodice on the inside. So I'm looking at that seam I just made. I'm so glad I chose to do lining pieces for this because you can see right through this fabric. The lighting, you may not be able to tell, but when I just lay it on the counter, you can see right through it. So when you go to pin this together, your pattern on the center front has a little dot, and that dot tells you where to stop sewing. So when you line up this nice little corner, there's your dot. So you're going to sew straight up 3/8 of an inch is all your center front. So what I have pinned here, I've got my lining, my greenish side, my orange side, and my lining. So this is how it looks right now, and I'm just going to sew this little part stopping at this button or at this pin right here. So we're going to stick that under the machine, sew it real quick. 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. So now, break my threads, bring it over to you. This is how the seam looks. This is how it looks from the outside. Isn't that going to be cute? The 2 layers together, and it's now lined, so the lining from the inside, it's going to look like this. Now, the whole rest of this, after I sew the green tie on, is literally folding under and stitching it over. That's it. It just says narrow hem. And because this doesn't fray, you really don't have to serge it. You don't have to double roll it like you could. You could do a double roll if you wanted to, like this, which I'm not going to do. What I am going to do, if you notice when I turn this over, you can see how this kind of flays out. And I don't like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim out wherever I'm going to hem 1/4 of an inch. So I'm going to trim along this area 1/4 of an inch. I'm going to trim this little underarm 1/4 of an inch, and I'm going to trim at the center front 1/4 of an inch. So when I fold this over, I'm going to pull this back so you can kind of see. So it's going to look like this once I trim it. And then when I fold this over, it encloses it, but it doesn't have an extra layer to push around in there. So that's what I'm going to do. That's it. So I'm going to go ahead and trim out real quick, and then I'm going to start turning and hemming. All right, here you can see where I've trimmed it out, just about 1/4 of an inch. So when I fold this over, you want to make sure this is perfectly smooth too, because you don't want any little buckles or ripples in your lining layer. I can put some pins in this. And it looks really pretty from the inside. I really like my clothing to be pretty on both sides. It just matters to me. All right, here I can see I have a little funky cut, so I'm going to smooth that out with my scissors here in a minute, but I'm going to go ahead and just keep turning. This is it. This is the whole thing. Now I'm going to straight stitch this. You could zigzag it if you want to because it is a knit. I don't like the look of a knit of a zigzag as a rule for a finished edge. So I'm not going to do that, but I'm just literally, you go all the way around this whole thing, just turning it up like that and top stitching it. So that's what I'm going to do. When I get to this seam right here, let's just press that open. Just going to finger press it and pin it, and then I'll probably go back and do a little bit of ironing, unless I see that I'm having lots of problems getting it to stay put when I'm doing my turning and my stitching. I'm just going to leave it like this. So that's it. I'm going to go ahead and do the orange side, and I'll show you how it looks, and then I'll change my thread color and go back and do the bluey green side. I've come to the end of the tie, just straight stitching, and it looks great. But when you want to turn this corner, let's say you're going to turn up this hem this direction, like this, notice how this doesn't look right. Let me flip it to the right side. You're going to get this hanging off. Not pretty. So this is what you do. You take that little corner and you fold it in like this first. And then when you fold this down, you'll get a corner like that. Let me put a pin in it so you can see it better. That's how it's going to look. And now we can top stitch. This side, because of the angle, is fine. You don't have to worry about it. You can just flip that over and keep on stitching. It's just this pointy corner on this end. So, I'm ready to get back to stitching.